Hey, what's going on guys? Hope you're all doing well. And yesterday I posted my review of the RTX 2080 Super, and you guys aren't really interested in this card. I get it. It's the price point, it's the mediocre spec bump, and it's the really sort of mellow performance over the regular RTX 2080, which out of the box is like 5%. There is one thing that's kind of super about the RTX 2080 Super though, and that's the memory clock speeds. So in my initial review, I was able to overclock the memory via a stable offset of plus 1350. In some cases it was more than that, but across all games it was plus 1350, and that is really unheard of when it comes to these RTX GPUs when it comes to overclocking the memory. The reason for that is because the RTX 2080 Super is actually running underclocked memory. It was my initial impression that this was running factory overclocked, just regular GDDR6 from the 2080. This one is running 16 gigabits per second memory at 15.5 gigabits per second. So you really do have quite a bit of headroom there when it comes to overclocking. And today we're going to see how much headroom you actually have when it comes to overclocking and the performance gains that you can get. So since the launch reviews have gone live for the 2080 Super, this thing has copped a bit of a beating, mostly because out of the box it's just not that much faster than its predecessor, the original 2080. While the RTX 2060 Super and 2070 Super received a pretty nice little spec bump from their vanilla models, the 2080 Super didn't really get anything substantial at all. My initial understanding was that the memory on the 2080 Super was just binned and factory overclocked 14 gigabits per second modules, but after doing a quick teardown this morning, we can in fact see that these are Samsung's 16 gigabits per second modules. Now I did check the 2060 Super and the 2070 Super after this to see if they also had the same 16 gigabits per second memory hiding underneath, but as we expected, we find the same 14 gigabits per second Micron memory that is pretty common on RTX GPUs. The cool thing here is that this memory can be pushed way beyond 16 gigabits per second, whereas with previous 14 gigabits per second GDDR6 memory, you could achieve a plus 1000 megahertz offset for RTX GPUs, and with the 2080 Super, it seems like that is doable as well, landing us at around 18 gigabits per second. You can claim back your additional 250 megahertz that Nvidia has underclocked from factory, and then likely an additional 750 to 1000 megahertz or so, depending on how lucky you are. I have two 2080 Supers on hand. One is the Founders Edition, and one is the Gaming X Trio from MSI. The Founders Edition is stable with a plus 1350 megahertz offset in all games and plus 1500 megahertz in just a few, including Heaven 4.0. The Gaming X Trio, on the other hand, isn't as good, but is still respectfully faster than the standard RTX 2080, with a stable offset of plus 1150 in all titles tested, landing us at 17.6 gigabits per second. So overclocking really is going to depend on the silicon quality and how lucky you are. However, I have seen two other reviews online where 18 gigabits per second was also achieved. So what does that actually mean in games? Well, the performance gains are really going to depend on the resolution that you're playing at and how memory dependent that game is, whether it's using high resolution textures, for example. In Shadow of the Tomb Raider, I saw an 8.9% boost in performance over the stock 2080 Super, making it just 11.5% slower than a stock 2080 Ti. Looking at the performance gains from overclocking a factory overclocked standard 2080, we're seeing a much smaller boost from overclocking of just around 4%. Rainbow Six Siege gave us the biggest performance boost overall for reasons unknown. I guess it's just really memory sensitive. Here we see an 11.8% boost over stock, making it around 5% slower than the stock 2080 Ti. Now, I'm not suggesting that overclocking the 2080 Super can give you 2080 Ti performance. Of course, you can just overclock that card too, and probably see around a 5.8% performance uplift, depending on the game and your luck with the silicon lottery. If you've already seen my initial review, you've probably already seen the rest of these graphs, so we'll move through them pretty quickly. Overall, there does seem to be some significant gains to be had at 1440p when playing at ultra settings. Please note that out of the box, the stock 2080 Super is still only around 5% faster than the original 2080, and if you're not planning on overclocking this card at all, then all of this is kind of irrelevant. If you're going to be using this card for 1080p gaming and not with games that utilize high definition textures, then the performance uplift that you're going to see from overclocking the memory is going to be a lot less than what you're seeing here, but 1440p and 4K with ultra textures will yield some pretty decent results. I was also very curious to look at the thermals on these memory modules. I thought maybe Nvidia had underclocked them to 15.5 gigabits per second from 16 gigabits per second because they might have been getting a bit too hot, but that doesn't seem to be the case at all. At stock, I measured one of the memory modules at just 62 degrees C with the fan speed set to auto and the room ambient at 19 degrees C, and when overclocked with a plus 1350 megahertz offset, that barely increases at all. Now this was just with Heaven 4.0 at 4K ultra settings, which might not be the biggest video memory stressor, so I also fired up Far Cry 5 at 4K, again ultra settings with HD textures enabled, and after 20 minutes we're seeing that top out at just 64.1 degrees C. So we are within safe ranges here in terms of thermals. So does this change anything about the RTX 2080 Super? You know, the initial reviews, they were kind of lukewarm at best. We're seeing about a 5% performance boost out of the box over the regular 2080, but with overclocking, things are getting interesting in my opinion. We do have a lot more overclocking headroom here, so if you were someone who was going to overclock your card anyway, and you're someone who is currently running an overclocked GPU in your system, then maybe this changes things for you. But for people who just leave their cards bone stock, this doesn't really change anything. In fact, it might even frustrate you that NVIDIA have underclocked the memory from 16 gigabits per second down to 15.5. I'm pretty confident that they could just re-enable it up to 16 gigabits per second with a simple driver update, but it is possible that they're just leaving those clock speeds in the tank for future GPU releases. And if you were keeping up with the rumors of the RTX Super Series GPUs, this was actually what was planned to happen. We were all expecting these Super GPUs to come fitted with the 16 gigabits per second memory, and then we got the RTX 2060 Super and 2070 Super that had the 14 gigabits per second modules, and I think we all just assumed at this point that the RTX 2080 Super would have the 14 gigabits per second modules as well. So overall, it's nice to know that the RTX 2080 Super is not just, well, a factory overclocked RTX 2080 with 128 additional CUDA cores. It's nice to see some additional hardware improvements over the regular 2080. So yeah, that's that. Overclocking is actually kind of interesting on this card. I'd love to know your thoughts down below, so feel free to leave some in the comments. Subscribe down below if you haven't already. A huge thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.